books and turn to page 505. Page 505. Let's all stand together and sing, Rise Up, O Men of God. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and soul and might and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, His kingdom riches long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and in the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to His task. Rise up and make her great. Rise high, the cross of Christ, and where the feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God. Page 279. Page 279. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear calling on my ear, the Son of God is roses. He walks with me and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks and the sound of His voice is so sweet, the birds must there sing, and the melody that He gave to me within my heart is ringing, and He walks with me and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I stay in the garden with Him, oh, the night around me before me, but He bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice in me is calling. Sing it. And He walks with me and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there,
good evening. Good to see you this evening on this beautiful September day. A couple things to remind you of. The Fall Fest coming up on the 11th. And then I scheduled Brother Mike McDaniel for our fall meeting. That's November 15th and 16th. So we'll do Saturday evening with a meal, and then he'll be preaching for us on Sunday as well. So please make note of that, the 15th and the 16th. He will be a help and a blessing to you. I promise you that. And he'll be here on November 15th and 16th. We'll continue to remind you as we move forward. Got an update from Brother Todd again after I sent out the prayer chain. She is continuing to move forward. Had some issues with some nausea the other day, but other than that, doing well. So continue to pray for Mrs. Todd, if you would, in her recovery from surgery. On the, what's the date, babe? 20th. There is the Encourage Her ladies at 10:30 in the morning. There'll be a sign-up sheet here Sunday for you, and so please make sure of that. I'll remind you of that as on Sunday as well. Brother Bob, you come forward. We'll take up time.
Absolutely. Miss Trina, life situation.
song before the pastor comes. Let's turn to page 376 and let's all stand together and sing Shelter in the Time of Storm.
Psalm 143. Not intending to keep jumping back into Psalms, but that's where the Lord keeps taking me. And it fits well because this traditionally is a Wednesday night prayer meeting. So some churches, Susan and I just went to one where that's all they did. They sang and they prayed and then they went home. And for some people, they'd be like, what in the world? No, but that's what we're here for. David here in Psalm 143, another psalm of prayer, another psalm of prophecy, so keeping in mind that there's always some context there to the Jew and the tribulation and the Jew and the millennial kingdom, both of those in a lot of the psalms that you read. But here in Psalm 143, we'll take a couple weeks to go through this one as we did with Psalm number 12. Verse number 1 says, "Hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. In thy faithfulness answer me, and in thy righteousness. And enter not into judgment with thy servant, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. For the enemy hath persecuted my soul, he hath smitten my life down to the ground. He hath made me to dwell in darkness, as those that have been long dead. Therefore is my spirit overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is desolate. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. I stretch forth my hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee as a thirsty land, Selah. Hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them that go down into the pit. You ever been there? Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. Deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. Teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God, thy spirit is good. Lead me into the land of uprightness. Quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake. For thy righteousness' sake, bring my soul out of trouble. And of thy mercy cut off mine enemies, and destroy all them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant. The phrase that drew me to the chapter is in verse 10, when he says, teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God. And then he uses this phrase, thy spirit is good. That's why there's a draw to God, because he's different than us. And there's never a moment that you go to him. You have friends in this world that you could talk to them, and on the phone you get off and you'd be like, no, they were off today, or there's just something weird. God's never like that. God's spirit is always good. God's words are always comforting. God's words are always uplifting. So he says, thy spirit is good. And then in verse 11, he asks him to quicken him. But notice why he does, and we'll get to hear next week. He says, for thy name's sake. David leaned into that one quite a bit. God, do this, but for your sake. God, do this not so that I look good, right? There's a lot of times in our life we do spiritual things so that this guy looks good, right? And David said, God, do this so you look good. God, do this so that your name is lifted up. Don't even mention me. Don't even have my name here. Back up in verse number 1 is where we get the title for what we're going to go through in the next few weeks, which is Hear My Prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. And then in verse 7, he says, hear me speedily. God, do it faster. Right? God, I'm talking, listen fast. And then make adjustments fast. Hear me, O Lord. Thomas Nelson said it is amazing how many different subjects and moods can be touched in a psalm of 12 verses. There is no poverty of expression, but rather emphatic diversity. And if you were going to use two words to describe David, emphatic diversity describes David. He had quite a vocabulary. He was very expressive. Why you connect to David is because David says the stuff out loud that you think. David says the stuff in Psalms to God that most of us keep inside of ourselves. And David is just willing to step out and say it. And David had such a relationship with God that he realized that he was just talking to a friend, as a man talks to a friend. And if you have true friends in your life, here's what you know. You can say anything. And there isn't anything that's out of bounds. Everything is out on the table. And David does such a great job of being a great example of just saying to God, God, this is terrible. And it's unfair. And I don't like it. And I need you to fix it. We may think those things, but how many times do we actually say those things to him? And then how many times do we say those things with an expectation that he's going to do something with it? How often do we pray thinking that God's actually going to work? Or how many times are we praying just because we're just praying? There's 2 points, and you know that means nothing. Right? Because there's a lot of subpoints. Point number 1 is this in verses 1 through 6. Here's his expressions in prayer. And then in verses 7 through 12, which we'll get next week, is the execution in prayer. David prayed, and we'll look at how he prayed and how he expressed himself to God in the first 6 verses. But then next week we're going to focus on this. David had an expectation that God was going to execute some things in his life. It wasn't just vain words and vain repetitions. David sat in the presence of God with an expectation that God was going to execute some things that he was asking him to do. And that is so convicting to me, because so many times in my life, I'm stuck in the area of just a vain repetition. I'm stuck in the area where I'm saying stuff. Do you ever just stop and listen to yourself pray? And you think, oh, if I was God, I wouldn't listen to me either. Because a lot of times we could just be praying and we're not really praying. Everybody knows the person that has a phrase that they say a lot, right? When they pray out loud, right? Oh, stop it, you bunch of hypocrites. Everybody knows somebody that when they pray, they have a phrase that they say. And why is that? Because that's the human nature of filler words, right? Bob Foltz, when we were in the Institute, the best thing he ever did, I just told someone this the other day, was he would record us, Derek, on a disc. It's called a CD. And actually, the first few might have been tapes. Might have been. Those were more of a rectangle thing. And we had to listen to it. And there was enough of us where we were only preaching every other week, so you had some time to listen to yourself and then critique yourself. And the worst voice in the world is the one that you're listening to right now. I apologize I cannot stand to hear myself. Cannot stand it. But I had to, for those years of Institute, go and listen to it. But you know what it did? It removed a lot of idle words. If you'll sit and listen to yourself, you'll realize how much you say or or like. Right? And what is it? That's just filler. It doesn't mean anything. And if we're not careful, a lot of our prayer is just filler. We're just saying stuff. And I hope you'll get some instruction of some expressions in prayer that David gives us, and my hope is that it'll be a help to you. Notice in verse number 1, here's the expression of adoration. He says, "Hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my" what? To my supplications. What are those? Supplication is used for the act of praying or thanksgiving. A supplication is something that I'm being honest. I'm pouring myself out in it. He says, "In thy faithfulness answer me, and in thy righteousness." He uses the phrase "give ear." That's used 27 times in your Bible. David uses it 12 times in the book of Psalms. God, give me your ear. God, I need you to listen to me. And if we're being fair, if I want God to listen to me, then I need to do some decent talking. I need to be able to give him something that has some substance to it. We talked about a couple weeks ago. How much time have you spent just worshiping God? How many times in our prayer are we just at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and it's been a frustrating day? Everybody has that day, right? And we're all guilty. I'm guilty of it. I'm so guilty of it. Just to be like, oh, this is just so terrible. And God gets to hear all about that. But how much time do I spend just saying, God, you're just so good. God, you are just so wonderful. I don't even know that I have enough language inside my brain to give you the praise that you're worthy of. I don't think there's enough adjectives that would describe it correctly. And I know myself, I don't lean into that very heavy, but I'm a pretty good whiner. David gives God some adoration. He said, God, give ear to my supplications. He says in Psalm 5:1, give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my meditation. God, would you just take a minute out of your eternity and just consider this? I'm not saying that this is a must. I'm not saying that this is, I have to have this. But God, would you just consider this for me? In chapter 17, verse 1, he says, hear the right, O Lord, attend unto my cry, give ear unto my prayer that goeth not out of feigned lips. David said, God, would you give ear to me, God? I am trying to be as honest and humble and forthright as I can be. And God, would you just take a minute and just listen to me? That humility is seen here in that word supplication. It's earnest, it's humble prayer. It's being focused. It's not telling someone, yeah, I'll pray for you, and then you don't remember to pray for them until the next time they mention what you were supposed to pray about. A supplication is being humble, and when was the last time we were earnest in our prayer? That's what we give ourselves to. Notice his honesty. David's honest in how he wants God to listen, right? And in how he wants God to answer. And this is important in your prayer. He says, in thy faithfulness answer me, and in thy righteousness. God, when you're giving me your ear and you're going to answer me, I want two of your best attributes to answer me. God, I want two of your best qualities to be the lead on the answer that you give me. You know how much that would change how we view how God answers our prayer? If I would keep in mind that in the answer that I get from my prayer, it's the faithfulness of God that's leading me there. In the answer that I get that I don't want, it was the faithfulness of God that presented it to me. It was the righteousness of God that said, yeah, here's your answer. That would help this. Well, I don't want that answer. Yeah, but God in his faithfulness said, here's the best thing for you. That's tough. That's taking me completely out of the way. Psalm 36:5. He says, thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens, and thy faithfulness reacheth unto the clouds. I want the faithfulness of God to be one of the things that is answering me. I don't just want what I want because I want it. You know what God knows? You probably don't need an Oompa Loompa. Or whatever random thing it is that you think you need. And God, if I'm being honest and I'm saying, God, I'm praying for this, but I want your faithfulness to be the filter on this. How many people have you prayed for? I'm seeing Luke back there, so it's making me think of Mark Krotz. That's not the answer to the prayer that I asked for. But you know what God did? In his faithfulness, he said, here's what's good. I don't like that. Right? God, that wasn't my expectation. When I asked for your ear, that wasn't the result that I was thinking that you were going to do. But God in his faithfulness said, no, here's the best thing. So what should I do? I should give God some adoration for that, some thanks for that. That should be the leading thing in my prayer of how God answers me. Psalm 31:1, he says, in thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. If I have the faithfulness of God, that will help things make sense. Now, listen, it may not make sense right now. And in that situation, it certainly doesn't feel good right now. But knowing that listen, God is just as faithful today as he was 15 years ago. And the only thing that's moved around is me. The faithfulness of God is there, and then the righteousness of God is there. God's not me, and thank God for that. God's not pulled here by his flesh and pulled over there by a sinful thought. God is absolutely in the center of the road, and his righteousness is leading the way. And David said, I want you to answer me in your faithfulness and in your righteousness. So God is faithful, and then, and I don't like this one either, God is right. And that's where sometimes my prayer gets messed up. Because I have the American mentality where God's a genie in the bottle, and I'm going to rub the lamp. I'm going to get my 3 wishes. And that's not prayer. The righteousness of God is there, the faithfulness of God is there, that adoration of coming before God and expressing myself to him and being honest. Yeah, I may want something. David laying on the ground, right? Asking for God to save the life of his son. And what did God say? No. That's tough. But God was right. Why? I see this far in front of me. As far as I see. I don't see 20 years down the road. We've said this before. Rewind in my life 5 years ago and say, hey, this is where you'd be. That's funny. But God sees. God knows where you're going. He knows in the moment, the feeling, everything you have right now, he knows how that's going to work in 5 years. But how much adoration do I have in my life? Notice in verse number 2. He then continues his thought. And he says, and enter not into judgment with thy servant. For in thy sight shall no man living be justified. Here's the expression of justification. Here's what David knew. David knew that if God gave him what he deserved, he was toast. So he said, God, I want your faithfulness out here. God, I want your righteousness out here. But if I could ask something, don't come swinging into judgment. Because if you do, I'm done. I'm guilty. And I think in David's life, that was the thing that knit his heart to God's heart. David was always upfront and honest in thee only have I. It's all me, Psalm 51. It's all against you. It's all against thee. He says, enter not into judgment. Let's go to Job chapter 9 and see what Job has to say about this type of a situation. Job would be someone to learn some things from when it comes to this type of thinking. My expression of adoration and then my expression of justification, knowing that if God is actually entering into judgment, I'm in a lot of trouble. Job 9, verse 1, Job answered and said, I know it is so of a truth, but how should man be just with God? If he will contend with him, he cannot answer him 1 of 1,000. If God actually stepped up and said, give me an answer, we don't have an answer. I don't have anything that I don't look forward to the judgment that I'll have in heaven someday. Why? I think it's going to be a lot of crickets. Because every question God's going to ask, my answer is going to be the same. It's like when you were little and you were supposed to do whatever. Pick one. And you didn't. And God says, and your mom or dad says, how come you didn't do that? Your answer doesn't matter, right? Because you didn't do it, and there's not a good reason why you didn't do it. Now, we all came up with different things, right? And our parents probably listened to wild and off-the-wall things, but that didn't change the fact that you're still guilty and you were still wrong. Verse 4, he is wise in heart and mighty in strength. That's God. Who hath hardened himself against him and hath prospered? You know what David said? I'm guilty. God, don't bring judgment. Job said, you harden against God? Okay, then you're not going to prosper. You're going to be in trouble. Which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in his anger, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble, which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, which doeth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. Behold, he taketh away, who can hinder him? Who will say unto him, what doest thou? You know what the answer is? No one's going to say that. God is so far above us. He's the one, yes, he's the one that we're praying to. He's the one that we're leaning into. And here's what I thought this week. How much do we forget that? That his ways are past finding out. That when God moves, we don't see him move. We don't understand the things that he does. And Job continues on, and in other chapters says even things even deeper about God and the way that he works. We don't understand, but David understood this. God, please don't enter into thy judgment. Why? Because no man living shall be justified. God, if I'm left to myself, I'm done. The reason I'm coming to you, the reason I'm laying myself out in front of you is because you're the one that my justification comes through. Ecclesiastes 7:20, he says, for there is not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. That's our condition. That's who we are. That's why David said what he said. God, don't enter into judgment. God, if you start passing out the judgment that we deserve, we're all in trouble. Galatians chapter 2, verse 16. Paul wraps it up. Let's go there and look at it. Paul wraps it up in this one verse. Say, what is justification? Here you go. I've heard it said before, just as if I never sinned. That's justification. But I didn't get that because I'm a great person. Here's how you got it. Galatians 2, verse 16. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. No man living shall be justified. There's nothing you can do that makes you justified. But by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. I can walk into the throne room of God boldly. I can speak to him boldly because I'm justified by the faith of Christ. And that's the only reason that I can. So David says, God, please don't enter into judgment. God, none of us would be justified if we couldn't stand it. So that has to be an expression in my prayer. I have to realize where I'm at. God is not impressed that you've been in church 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Because the only reason you are where you are is because of the justification of Jesus Christ. No, there's no other reason. And if we're playing any other game, then we're just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that will show itself eventually. There's the adoration, there's the justification. Look at verse number 3. He says, for the enemy hath persecuted my soul. Here's the confrontation. Here's why he's coming to God. You know what God wants? He wants honesty. Don't get down on your knees or sit in your chair or driving down the road. Don't pray with smoke and mirrors. Just be open with him. For the enemy hath persecuted my soul. He hath smitten my life down to the ground. He hath made me to dwell in darkness as those that have been long dead. Spiritually, he felt like a zombie. Spiritually, he felt disconnected from everybody. And why should I keep going? Why should I keep doing? Every time that I do good, I get smacked down. Every time that I start to gain some momentum, I get pushed down. You know why that's true in your life? Because the devil is the accuser of the brethren. It's what he lives for. And if you're like me, if you are prone to thoughts dancing around in your head, I think I described it years ago as just a bouncy ball. This is what the devil does for me. He'll come in my head, he'll know what little thing that'll bother me and distract me all day, and he just walks by my brain and he throws that bouncy ball in there. And the entire day, it's just bouncing around in my head. And by the time I get 4 to 5 hours into the day, the world's almost over, right? The sky's falling for sure, Chicken Little. Bad things are going to happen. Why? And the devil's he's thrilled. He is the accuser of the brethren. David said, he's smitten me down to the ground. He'd made me to dwell in darkness. Thomas Nelson said his tormentors had forced him to live in isolation, to live in darkness, to be cut off, to be forgotten like the ancient corpses in the tombs. You know what his favorite tactic is? Isolation. That's why church is important. That's why fellowship outside of church is important. Because if he can isolate you, he can win. If he can get you by yourself and get your thoughts going, battle's already over before it even started. And he'll just walk away. And you'll be done. Why? Because he isolated you. He put you in the darkness. Job talks about that in Job chapter 30. There's going to be moments of darkness. Okay? How are you going to deal with it? Are you just going to sit up? Listen, David is standing here saying to God, God, he is winning every day. And every day I'm sitting in darkness. You ever get mad at yourself? And mad at the sin that torments you? And mad at the stuff. Listen, I'm not talking about you have an illicit drug problem or you're selling yourself on the street or you're into wild. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. Just the stuff that just distracts you, that just pulls your attention away. Just dumb stuff. Like the Buckeyes, right? That's just dumb. It's dumb stuff. What does he want to do? He wants to bring those things in, isolate you out. He wants to weaken you down. Why? Because he wins. He's not going to tempt me with a bunch of other stuff in the world. I don't care. But for me, you just got to get thoughts rolling around in my head. This thing or that worry. And it'll just start at the beginning of the day, and boom, I'm gone. And if I don't catch it quick enough, by the time I come home, she's like, what in the world is wrong with you? What happened to you today? And if I'm honest, I got to say I'm just a pansy. I just gave in at like 9:30 today. Why? That's what isolation and darkness. And David's saying to God, God, there's confrontation in my life. Express yourself in prayer. Listen, he already knows. He's literally watching you live your life. If he knows how many hairs are on or off your head, he knows. So just talk to him. Ask him for help, and then change some things in your life. Notice verse number 4. Here's the desperation. What's the first word in verse 4? Therefore. God, because of that. You know what he says in verse 4? I'm done. I'm done. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm out. My spirit is overwhelmed within me. And my heart within me is what? Desolate. It's a barren wasteland. I have no feeling about it. I don't care anymore. It's a dangerous place to be. How do you get there, David? Some darkness. I'm losing every day. I just don't feel like I can win. What is that? That's expressing yourself to God in prayer. For the men in the room, that's not weakness. Here's what I know about all the men in the room. You struggle. And if you struggle, you need to get some help. Man up. Played too many spiritual macho games. And here you got a guy that if he's in this room, he could take us all. And he's just saying to God, God, because of this stuff, I'm overwhelmed. God, let me put it in today's terms, I'm full of anxiety. God, I'm really stressed out. David? Yeah. Man after God's own heart. The guy that took off Goliath's heads. The guy that collected a dowry for Saul's daughter. That guy says, I'm so overwhelmed. And God inside of me is just desolate. I don't even have a feeling about it anymore. His spirit was ready to give up. Maybe he had already given up. His heart was numb. But take notice. Those are the feelings, right? That's what's going on inside of him. But what is he literally doing right now? He's talking to God about it. So just because I have the feeling, just because that's the symptom, it doesn't mean that God is not listening or that God doesn't care. Maybe I need to get desperate. Maybe I need to be honest. Maybe I really need to go to him and pour myself out to him. Go to chapter 77, if you would. Look at verse number 1 through 3. Psalm 77, 1 through 3. Verse 1 says, I cried unto God with my voice, even unto God with my voice, and he did what? What did he do? He gave ear. Isn't that what David asked for in Psalm 143? Yeah. So David says here, hey, I cried to him and he gave ear. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. My soul ran in the night, in the darkness, in the isolation. Then notice what he says is after that. And it ceased not. You ever have something keep you up? You know what that means? You're human. Doesn't mean you're broke. Just means you're human. My soul refused to be what? Comforted. My heart is desolate. Notice what he says in verse 3. I remembered God. And what? And was troubled. You know why? Because when your heart's desolate, when you're overwhelmed, and you think about God, the only thing the devil's going to bring into your mind is God is a God of judgment. God's looking down on you. Oh, and you're a Christian, are you? And you're struggling with that stuff? Oh boy, that's embarrassing. I wouldn't tell other Christians about that. And where are you? You're laying in the darkness in your room, staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed. Notice what he says in verse 3. What do you do? Complained. And my spirit was overwhelmed. You know what that makes me and you? Just people. Broken, imperfect, sinful people. And you have to have the ability to express yourself to God and say, I'm done. I'm tired of being in the dark. I'm tired of being desolate. I'm tired of being without you. Reminder, this is the man after God's own heart. This is the sweet psalmist of Israel. It is sometimes the lot of the best men and the best women to have their spirits for a time overwhelmed and their hearts desolate and in a state of doubting. Why? We're sinful, and the devil's the accuser of the brethren. Job chapter 1. Satan goes to present himself to God. Hey, where you been? Oh, just walking to and fro in the earth. What do you think he's doing today? He's just walking to and fro in the earth. Why? This is all he's got. He gave up the only glory he would ever have. He was the anointed cherub of God, that musical instrument that filled heaven. He was the splendor above the throne. And now where is he? He's a nomad in the desert of this world. And what's his job? Well, his job is to damn as many people as he can to hell. And job number 2 is to keep you in the darkness. And to keep you overwhelmed. David said, God, my heart is desolate. My spirit is overwhelmed. But notice verse number 5. Here's the meditation. So David expresses those things to God and says those things to God and gets those things off of his chest. But the psalm doesn't stop there. And that's our issue. We may be able to say all of those things and articulate all of those things, but here's where we'll struggle, is if that's where we stop. Do you actually want the help for the stuff that you're dealing with? So he says, I remember the days of old. God, I remember you working in my life. I remember being in the light. I remember that when my spirit was not overwhelmed. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. You know what he's doing? He's just thinking back to the goodness of God and how wonderful God has been in his life, and he is just meditating on all of the goodness of God that he can bring up. That's how you fight it. For all the moments in the darkness and all the moments where it doesn't make sense and all the moments that it's not fair, those moments are not greater than the goodness of God in your life. Our issue is we just often meditate on the wrong things. We put too much onto those things. Go back to Psalm 77. Pick up in verse number 4. We read to verse 3. Verse 4 says, Thou holdest mine eyes waking. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I've considered the days of old, the years of the ancient time. So he's doing what? He's remembering. I call to remembrance my song in the night. I commune with mine own heart, and my spirit made diligent search. Will the Lord cast off forever? And will he be favorable no more? Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail evermore? Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in his anger shut up his tender mercies? Selah. And I said, this is my infirmity. You know what our infirmity is? To be negative. That nothing good ever happens to me. That once again I've lost my tail and I can't find it. Right? That's our infirmity. But I will remember the years of the right hand of the Most High. Verse 11, I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember the wonders of old. I will meditate also of all thy work and talk of thy doings. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? You know what will get you out of that? Meditating on who God is. Meditating on how great God has been. The reality is that may be a struggle. That may be something for you that it just plagues you. Okay, that means you're human. But how are you getting out of it? Just because you're there, just because it's dark, just because it ain't great, it doesn't mean that God's not good. And it doesn't mean, as David said, all the questions he asked, the answer to every one of those questions is no. No, God is still good. And who is greater than our God? Answer, no one. But in our despondency, boy, that can end quickly, can't it? Back in Psalm 143, notice verse 6. So here's what he does. Here's the action, and this will be hard for Northern Independent Baptists. What's he do? Do it with me. You ready? Are you ready? What's he do? He stretched forth his hands unto thee. And what's he say? My soul thirsteth for thee. You know what you have to do? You have to remind yourself of who he is and how much you need him. You know what the world will try to do? The world will try to quench that thirst that you have inside of yourself that only God fills. The devil will try to convince you 87 ways from Sunday of different things that will quench that. It won't. It won't. And the longer you stay in that spot where you're not expressing yourself to God, there has to be some aspiration, verse number 6, in your life. What's your aspiration? God's your hope. God is your hope of everything that's good before in your life and to what is going to come. And David said, I stretch forth my hands to thee. My soul thirsteth. God, I need you above all of this stuff. When's the last time you prayed that way? Well, God bless today. Hope it's a good one. That's not doing it. That's not getting it done. Well, Lord, at the end of the day, it's been another bad one. Thanks for that. That's not it, man. Did you have a bad day? Verse 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell him. Sit with him. And talk to him out loud. Not in your head, because that gets muddled. You'll be thinking of something else in five seconds. Lord, as we start, pizza sounds good, right? That's prayer, right? Inside your head, right? It's like Wednesday night prayer, right? When Nick's praying, everybody's thinking, I should have had a cheeseburger on the way here, right? That's how it goes. That's how our brains work. Get somewhere and just pray, and then maybe do something wild, and maybe actually, I know some of you didn't stretch your hands up. You don't stick in the mud. It'd be good for you. Maybe Sunday we'll have a praise section and you can sit in it. There is an expectation for God to answer. And he stretches out his arms to grasp hold of that heavenly hope. How much expression is in your prayer? How much of your prayer does heaven feel? Isn't he touched with the feeling of our infirmities? Okay. If that's true, which it is, then how much of you in your prayer does heaven feel? How much are you personally connected to your God so that you could sit there and say, God, my soul thirsts for you. God, I need you. Above all of this stuff, you're the most important thing in my life. Father, help us. God, we need you to help us. We need you to help us make this an active part of who we are. God, you keep bringing me back here, which tells me, God, we need to work on this. God, we need to be touching heaven. It'll help us. It'll help the church. It'll help us, God, be focused on the things that we need to be focused on. Thank you, God, for those that have come out, made the time this evening. I hope it's been a help to them. Keep us safe as we go home. Bring us back on Sunday. God, I pray you'd meet with us again.